Welcome back to Oulton Park, where we switch from saloons to sports cars. It's the Dunlop Tuscan Challenge. Andy Glossop caught up with some of the drivers.
You've obviously done this championship before, but tell us a little bit about the car.
Well, at the moment it's a standard TVR Tuscan with a Hollinger 6-speed sequential gearbox. We're building a new Cigaris, so this wasn't really meant to be out, so that's why it doesn't look as nice as it should do. But hopefully in about 6 weeks' time we should have the new car out.
So Graham, tell us a bit about your car.
It's an ex-Tuscan Challenge car. It last ran in the full challenge 2 years ago with Andy Holden. We bought it for last season to run in what was the Car Club series, and for that we put a standard Rover V8 engine in it. So it looks the same as the other cars, but only has about half the horsepower. So it's going to be interesting. We're still aiming to catch one or two of them. We did a one-off race at Snetterton with them last year, and we weren't too far off the back of the pack with this motor. So a little bit of tweaking, we think we'll have the tail enders of the Class A cars.
My name's Tim Broughton. This is a TVR Tasman, originally built about 1995 by Richard Thorpe from Sheffield. 2 years ago it was running V6. It's now got a 2-litre Cosworth turbo engine in it, around about 330 at the wheels, so it is quite quick. Yeah. We're just hoping it goes around corners this year as well.
Okay, Cliff, so tell us a bit about your car.
We started out in the TVR CC series two years ago with a 2.8. Decided to go a turbo engine. Had lots of problems last year. Managed one race and to put it on its roof once. We're hoping just to try and get used to the car this year, get a bit of reliability, then to build towards the end of the year with pace. So yeah, see how it goes.
Excellent. A lot of people saying first time out on slicks.
It will be for me. Did a first test at Mallory on Wednesday. It was wet, but we didn't have a full set of slicks there, so just trundling it around, see if anything fall off on the Formula R's. But slicks, first time for me today as well. Like many, I think. Yeah.
And the weather conditions could do absolutely anything today, couldn't it?
We're hoping they don't change, but we're a small team. We wouldn't have time to change the tyres to wets if it was a downpour, 10 minutes before we were due to go out. So we'll just be poddling around on slicks and trying to get a feel for them anyway. So we're hoping it stays like this, but the forecast isn't good. No.
Behind this curtain here, this awning, is the all-new Cigaris, but at the moment they're keeping it quite a secret. So we're going to have to wait a little while to see exactly what it looks like.
But fortunately, we'll get to see exactly what that Cigaris of Tim Hood looks like in a few moments' time, because although Tim was unable to take part in qualifying this morning, he is being allowed to take the start of the race. Very good news indeed, because that's a beautiful new car, based on the Tuscan chassis, with the bodywork from the Cigaris car on top of it. A bit more complicated than that, a bit more to it, or there it is now. Rather menacing looking black car, just hiding behind the Armco barriers there and leading out the field of Dunlop Tuscans. The pole position man though is Darren Dowling. He was approximately 6/10 quicker than David Mason in qualifying. Both of these two drivers particularly experienced in TVR Tuscan racing. Steve Hall and Hugh Marshall on row 2, Mark Cockin and Steve Glynn row 3, Graham Walden and Dean Cook row 4, Tim Broughton and Cliff Jobson line up on row 5. So the cars all on the grid and the green flag is waved at the back, so we are almost ready to go racing in the first round of the Dunlop Tuscan Challenge. The red lights are on and they go out now. And who is going to make the best start? Well, it looks to me as if it's not the pole position man that's got the lead into the first corner. It is indeed David Mason from the outside of the front row in the yellow and red car from Darren Dowling there in second place. Both of these drivers have run Tuscan race in the past. Someone getting very out of shape there. I wonder who that is. I think that could be Cliff Jobson from towards the middle of the grid that's got sideways and has come to a stop in the middle of the circuit. But never mind that, because the leaders already making their way into Foster's for the first time. It's a good advantage already for David Mason, the man who, 2 or 3 seasons ago, had some very good dices with Lee Caroline when the Tuscan Challenge was a more national championship. More often than not, though, it was Caroline, the renowned short oval racer, and that's the same kind of background that David Mason comes from, that won out. So Mason leads Dowling into Druids for the first time, and then in third place it's the number 14 car of Mark Cockin. He's in the first of the Griffiths, indeed the only Griffith on the grid this weekend. Leading Hugh Marshall there into Lodge Corner. Someone smoking there, that's number 33, Tim Broughton, who we were hearing from a little bit earlier on in the Tasman. 2-litre Cosworth engine in that car. It smokes as it goes into Oulton Park for the second time. The menacing paintwork on the front of that car, looking like shark's teeth. Here comes David Mason, halfway round his second lap. A lead now of, what, just over a second that must be over Dowling. Then a long way back to the third place car, which is Mark Hockin. He's got Hugh Marshall right behind him, and also the number 11 car as well. That's Steve Glenn, who had a rather troubled 2005 season. Hockin, one of the younger drivers in the field, 21 years of age. His first year racing in this challenge, raced in the TVR Car Club Championship last year, but these two championships have been merged into this series of races this time. A change there for third place. The less experienced driver losing out to Hugh Marshall there, the former production saloon racer. So Hugh Marshall goes up into third position, Hockin down to fourth, Glynn there in fifth. Now this gap is pretty much starting now between the top two, isn't it, with David Mason leading Dowling, getting a little bit sideways as he gets the power on through Foster's corner. That time was Mason. Up Clay Hill, panoramic view there of the scenery. Mason never had the largest of budgets to go Tuscan racing. It was an ever financial struggle for him to even be at the racetracks. His results usually exceeded his budget, it has to be said. A very talented driver. Some very talented drivers in Tuscans down the years. There's a car going slowly there. I think that might have been Ian Johnson there, who was starting from the back of the grid in his Camaro. Johnson possibly limping into retirement down there at Foster's. Shortly to be some lappery done by the leaders. Mason gets to the car first. And goes through, as does Darren Dowling through Deerleap. And on to another lap. This is the 8th lap now. It's Broughton with his smoking, squealing Tasman, much modified, ahead of the leaders. He's about to go a lap down. Does so at Foster's as Mason sprints through. Dowling will try to follow as well. Into Druids once more. This then for the 8th time. It's a lead now of around about 2.5 seconds for David Mason. I'm wondering if Darren Dowling's got an answer to it. Mason would normally finish ahead of Dowling back in the Tuscan Challenge in the earlier part of this millennium. But now there's been a change, hasn't there? Because through into the lead has gone Darren Dowling, number 7, ahead of David Mason now. That was out of our sight. Now, has Mason got a problem? He's falling back, certainly, as he goes down the avenue. You see Ian Johnson's car, Ian Jones's car, I beg your pardon, in the background as well. But has Mason got a problem? Well, it looks like he has, because he's losing quite a lot of ground there. Losing a place 2 to the number 11 car of Steve Glynn, who's running back in a 5th position at the moment. So Mason, I think, is going to go into retirement. So that's a great shame for the man who was in the lead of this 20-minute Dunlop Tuscan Challenge race. Dowling now out on his own, turns into Lodge Corner that time. So on to the 14th lap, into the last 5 laps of this race. Now here coming towards us is a very menacing looking car. It's Tim Hudd there in the number 10 TVR Cigaris. as into the pits comes David Mason. As we predicted, he's out of the race, I'm afraid. Mason very frustrated indeed. There's some more lappery to be done by Darren Dowling. Coming towards us now is the number 27 car of Cliff Jobson. Through past that back marker goes Darren Dowling. He's lapped the field already, has Darren. We'll go on to the 16th lap of the race. So Downing's gone through to start his 16th lap. Here's Hugh Marshall there in second place now. With the demise of David Mason, you can see Tim Hood coming through the field as well in Cigaris. Now I wonder if Hood's going to be able to do anything about Marshall before the end of this race. Hood, we understand, having been instructed to keep out of any tight situations, only to overtake when it's absolutely safe to do so. Because of that car, a bit of an unknown quantity with no qualifying. But he's closing in on Marshall. He's been lapping in pretty similar lap times, these. Hood just dipping into the 1 minute 5 second brackets. Marshall's best time in the 1 minute 6s. But as they go around the lap, the 16th lap, remember, for the leaders, it's the 15th lap for these guys. Hood closes in, but he's back delayed there, as we say that, by one of the back markers. Dowling goes through again. What's happening for second place? This battle more than a few yards down the road. It's a lap and a few yards down the road, but it's still Marshall for the moment. We got into Tuscan racing in the late 1990s. That's Graham Walden there that's being passed by the number 7 car of the race leader, Darren Dowling. Walden, who runs in Class B of the championship. It's not the full race Tuscan from the Tuscan Challenge. It's one of those cars, but it's effectively been downgraded to TVR Challenge spec. Dowling through to complete yet another lap then. It's been a rather lonely race for him since David Mason disappeared at around about half distance. He's now on to his 18th lap. Much closer for second now though, isn't it? Because Marshall and Hood absolutely together. Hood, the driver from Leicestershire. Marshall, the London driver, 54 years of age. You wonder though if Hood is going to mount an attack on Marshall, having been given those instructions. Tim Broughton about to be lapped once more by Darren Dowling. That will be for the second time. So he goes 2 laps down. Quite a big speed differential in qualifying this morning. Dowling was some 20 seconds faster than Howard Bryan, the racing newcomer. Only something like his third ever race. Had a couple of outings at Anglesey, rather wet Anglesey it was last December. On to the final lap goes our race leader then, Darren Dowling. Pretty much unbeatable now actually, with this advantage of a lap over these two cars in second and third positions. Ignore the car on the inside there, that's a back marker. But it was Marshall and Hood that were still there vying for second and third position, with what, only about half a second between them, if that, as they went on to the last lap. Dowling through Knickerbrook for the final time. Makes his way through Druid, now the right-hander. It's then the first race of a busy season for the Dunlop Tuscan Challenge. After this they go to Silverstone. There's also races at Castle Combe, Pembrey, an international race at Spa to look forward to as well. But race number 1 goes to Darren Dowling. He takes the checkered flag now. Second place goes to Hugh Marshall. In third place in the end was Tim Hood. Fourth was Mark Hockin in the Griffith. Steve Glynn fifth in the Tuscan. Tim Broughton, the first of the Tasman's home, in sixth place. Then it was Graham Walden and Dean Cook, who rounded out the top 8. We'll be right back with more Tuscan racing after the break. For the second round of the Dunlop Tuscan Challenge, the competitors have moved on to the National Circuit at Silverstone, and the good news is that Cigaris, which looked absolutely fantastic when it made its debut at Oulton Park last time out, is back out for a proper crack at the race this time in the hands of Tim Hood. We caught up with him after qualifying.
Having a few problems early on, aren't we?
Well, yes, it's a new car. We've been developing this now for the past 6 months in conjunction with quite a few people. And yes, teething problems. We're going to get them, we knew we would. The build came quite late to us, to be honest. So we've only really done one test day, which has been the problem. So what we're doing at the moment is using the race meetings as test days. So we're doing as watching in public, as they say. So yeah.